If you told me a few years ago that I could be in the same photo as Beyonce, I never would have believed you. But now that we have AI-generated art, anything is possible. But at what cost? AI-generated images can be fun to experiment with, but you likely know a little about the ethical concerns that they can come with. From using artists' works without paying them, to creating false images to sway public opinion, there are many things to be aware of when it comes to AI-generative art. Today, we'll be focusing on identifying these AI-generated images. If you look at an image that I created here using the app PhotoLeap, you can see that this one's obviously AI-generated. There's no way that the Queen and Margaret Thatcher would be on a shopping spree together, right? So I'm guessing that you probably wouldn't believe a headline which suggested that Orchard Park had an unexpected visitor last week. But not all cases are cut and clear. If you're on the app X, formerly known as Twitter, you may have seen an deepfake edit of Bella Hadid going around, supposedly talking about her support for the Israeli government's attacks on Palestine. Given the fact that Bella Hadid is Palestinian and that she has famously advocated for Palestine, most people understood that this edit was fake, but not everyone. So what can you do to protect yourself on social media from AI-generated images? We'll be using a few tips from online experts to help you identify these AI-generated images. Let's begin. Say you're scrolling through social media and you see this image under the headline of Greta Gerwig working on new production. Now it seems realistic enough, but it's AI-generated. If you've looked closely enough, you've probably already noticed why it's fake, but let's point a few things out to help you make it clearer. Now the hands are always a good place to start. If you look at Greta's hands, from afar they don't look that weird, they don't look that off-putting, but if you look at this person's hands here, you can clearly see that it's a blob. It's not really a hand. Also look at the points where two people's bodies interact. Now if you look at this person behind Greta's shoulder, you can see that her face is warped towards her shoulder. So even with these two small tips and also these glasses here, you might be able to see a little bit why this is fake. Now, even looking quickly at this photo, you can see that this is a real one. Her face looks very realistic and very normal, what you'd expect, and her fingers are able to be seen individually. Okay, so the first exercise is done. Let's move on to a trickier one. If you saw this image under a headline that Canadians were protesting to restrict maple syrup sales to the US, you might think that there's some breakfast food related controversy that you're unaware of, but you know better than that. Let's look at why this image might be fake. If you look at the text here in the background, you can see that this is not real Latin script, it's just gibberish. Another thing that you may have noticed already is the Canadian flag. If you've seen the flag a few times while you're living in Canada, you'll know that this is not what the flag looks like. Of course, there is a tip about the hands. If you look at this hand here, it's clearly a blob again and not a real human hand. And if all of those tips didn't work, you can always look in the background. The protesters here are very clearly just red dots rather than actual human people. Now let's compare this with a real version. This is from a protest that happened in Kelowna. The text is clearly real and people's faces, although we might be facing into them, are also real and not just blobs. So this is our second example. Now lastly, let's move on to the trickiest one. Lastly, let's look at this portrait of Kim Kardashian. If you look at this image close up and compare it to a real one of hers, there really isn't much that's different, and that's where we get to the dangers of AI-generated images. Sometimes it's just really hard to tell if they're fake. When I looked at the real image of her, the only things I could see were the two dots on her forehead that aren't there in real life, and her jawline, which is slightly different than what it really is. I don't know about you, but I definitely wouldn't have noticed that this was fake if I didn't look very, very, very closely. So what have you learned? When we see an image on social media posted under a headline that's clearly looking for clicks, we need to exercise a lot of caution no matter who the source is. If you can't tell at first glance if it's fake or not, you can always use the tips I gave you today, such as looking at the hands, looking at the text, looking at the background, to determine if the image may be fake. At least until AI improves upon these little mistakes, I hope that these tips can help you stay safe online.